by the time I retired, I had flown a ton of different stuff. And I think today I'm sitting at 38 different airplanes.
Oh my God.
Um, but so what does that mean? That means um, I had a lot of stuff, a lot of numbers going through my head, and I have to pick the ones that, hey, this is the one that is making me money. I better know this one very well, and I can have some familiarity with other ones. Well, right when I retired, about the day after, a former commander of mine called me, and he said, "Hey, Jared, um, his name's Dave. He's since passed, but love that man. He was such a good guy." He called me up and he said, "I'm looking for somebody that can kind of get in anything and fly it." And I was like, that piqued my interest. I said, "Okay, well, this sounds fun." I said, "Well, what are we doing, Dave?" And he said, "I work for a company that rescues kids that have been sold into human trafficking."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, I'm in. Whatever you need." He said, "I can't pay you a lot." I said, "You don't have to pay me anything, Dave. Just if you can cover expenses, that'd be great." So Dave and I talked. We worked it out. He wanted me to meet the CEO of the company, so I flew out there. I met the CEO. Him and I hit it off well. Um, I like him. Still talk to him today. He still mentors me on stuff today. Uh, but they needed a pilot to help with their mission, and I sat around and I was still teaching for my company, but I sat around and I'd call Dave or I'd call the CEO. I'd change it out every week. One week I'd call Dave, the next week I'd call the CEO, next week I'd call Dave, just asking if they had anything. Um, at the time, they'd say, "We're working on things. We'll let you know when we need you." And I think they said, "I think Jared's like a trapped border collie in an apartment. We're not sure he's not chewing down the drapes or something. He's calling all the time looking for work." Which I was happy to do it. I'm out flying, training sorties in my airplanes, but I want to go be a part of this rescue mission. I think this is fantastic.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us from around the world, they say, okay, we know where Canada is, and British Columbia on the west coast, right? Right. And we have that big city there called Vancouver. Well, we are 500 miles north of Vancouver, or 800 kilometers in a city called Prince George, about 82,000 people, lots of forest, lots within 50 miles, probably 100 lakes. It is nature's paradise, and we have lots of friends here: black bears, grizzly bear, caribou, deer, wolves, foxes, you name it, all here. We call it paradise. Today we got a very, very interesting guest. His name is Jared Lilje, and he is very, very interesting. He is an entrepreneur, but he also served in the U.S. Air Force as a special operations pilot with over 7,000 flight hours. And then he made the decision to leave and become an entrepreneur in fashion design, for one, and he did a lot of other things. Jared, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, John. It's an honor to be here.
So, if I spent some time in the Air Force, I was drafted in the Air Force when I was 18 in Holland, and was in the Air Force for a little longer than 2 years. I wanted to be a pilot, but I didn't qualify to become a pilot. But I was in Special Forces, but I wanted to be a pilot. I became a pilot later, but so it's always interesting to me to see you having gone into the Air Force and then became a pilot and had 7,000 flight hours. That's a lot of hours. Tell us about that. First tell us about where you're from initially. Where did you get your training educationally, I mean, and then how did you end up in the Air Force? And tell us a bit about that as you go forward.
Sure. Uh, all of that is a little bit of an unconventional route to become a pilot. But I'm originally from Carson City, Nevada. It's the
Okay.
capital of Nevada on the west coast of the United States. Um, I grew up there, graduated in 1991. In 1990, if you remember, uh, Desert Storm was in full swing. And as a young kid in high school, I had planned to go to college. I didn't really know what I wanted to study. I didn't really have much direction in that as far as have big plans of what I wanted to be when I grow up, if you will. I enjoyed ski racing, and most of my time, either working my part-time job or out trying to figure out a way how to afford a lift ticket to go skiing. Um, so from there, when Desert Storm was going, I remember watching all the news about it and all the coverage, and I thought, wow, uh, there's something out there. There's something I should be a part of. Something I should, maybe I could be part of something like that
Right.
team. I had one of my best friends at the time, during that same time, he went and enlisted in the Marine Corps, and I thought, wow, I really respected him. He's a smart kid. He's joining the Marine Corps. Maybe I ought to look into this. So I happened to walk into the Air Force recruiter's office, and I was very surprised on how that conversation went. He was just blatantly honest about all the good, all the bad, and the things he didn't like about it. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound much like what I've heard recruiters are like. So I kind of took a liking to that, and I thought, well, I'll give I'll enlist into the Air Force and see what that brings me. As a young child in my mind, uh, I thought, he talked about the Air Force having a ski team, and I thought, well, maybe there's an opportunity for me to continue skiing through the Air Force, and so I got into becoming a mechanic and was stationed out in Dover, Delaware, as a mechanic on C5 Galaxies, which kind of dashed my idea of maybe staying somewhere in a mountain region where I could continue to ski. So
Now, the
skiing kind of fell by the
C5
wayside.
Galaxy is a bomber. It's a big plane, right?
It's a big cargo plane.
Right.
Yeah. It's our biggest cargo plane we have in military service
Right.
for the U.S.
Right.
So,
Still flying today,
but
actually.
yeah, it still flies today. And becoming a mechanic on that, uh, hanging up the skis for a while, I just decided, I really enjoyed it. I really like turning wrenches. I really like learning how things work. I like fixing things. So I really took to it, and I enjoyed it a lot. I worked with a lot of good folks and had good supervision. Um, and they kind of let me grow as a young man, developing, a new skill as a mechanic in the Air Force.
How old were you
I
then,
did that.
Jared? How old were you then?
That was Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. It's completely on the other side of the United States, out on the east coast of the United States.
How old were you
Oh,
then?
how old was I?
Yeah.
I was 19 at the time.
Young fella, eh?
19.
Yeah.
Yep, young fella.
Yeah.
Um, while working there as a mechanic, I ended up getting married, started a family, and my wife at the time graduated nursing school, and I think I was a staff sergeant, so an NCO, and she came home from her first 2 weeks of work, and I realized how powerful a education is, because I'd been working at this time. I've probably been in 5 years, 6 years maybe, and an NCO, and I thought I was doing pretty good. I was able to provide for our family. But when I saw her nursing paycheck, I thought, wow, that's good. She's finished. Maybe I ought to get my rear end in school and do something more,
Right.
because there's a lot of potential there. So I ended up getting my education through a military program that partners with different universities. So Southern Illinois University has a campus on Dover Air Force Base where I went and I studied industrial technology.
So now you're
Uh,
about 25, 26?
um, at this point, um, yeah, I'm probably 25, pushing, starting to get towards 26, a little closer.
Right.
and I started thinking that this pilot thing might be a real option for me. I always thought that it'd be cool to be a pilot. I never thought, oh, I'm not smart enough. All those guys graduated the Air Force Academy, and all these super smart folks, whatever. And I thought to myself, you know what? Why am I telling myself no? Why am I turning myself down before? And so I thought, well, I'm just going to throw everything I am at it. And I hurried through college as fast as I can, get the best grades I could. And strangely enough, I never was a good high school student. I like to have fun more than I like to study. But when you've got children to feed and a career, you're looking down, what am I going to do to provide for my family? And it changes all sorts of perspectives. So I got really good grades in college. I was able to knock out my bachelor's degree in 3 years, uh, which it was, I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. Working full time in the U.S. military while going to school full time while having children. I don't know that I slept for those 3 years, but I got it done and applied to become a pilot. And so now I'm back when I went through, and I'm not sure what the rules are today, but you had to graduate pilot training by your 30th birthday. So it was important that I was in there and had a graduation date that I could be done by my 30th birthday. So I was pushing the limit. It was tight. That's why I had to get that college done in 3 years. But I went for it. Was fortunate enough to get selected, go to pilot training, um, and moved my family out to a little town called Enid, Oklahoma, and did my year of pilot training out there, and came back and got my first pick, the first airplane I wanted. I wanted to fly. I wanted to fly the C5 because I started on it as a child, and I was a mechanic on it for so long. And I thought, well, it would only be appropriate for me to go back and fly that airplane. So it was quite the journey to get there, but I made it. I made it back to Dover Air Force Base as a C5 pilot and a second lieutenant, and I think it was beginning of 2001, spring of 2001. So that was kind of maybe a bit of a pared down way to get out there, but it was an interesting ride for sure.
So how long then were you at Dover and flying the C5s?
I flew the C5 for about 5 years at Dover Air Force Base, and then I transitioned into the C-17 and flew C-17s for a couple of years there.
Right.
Um, at that point
Is the
in my
C-17 an upgraded C5 cargo?
It is a more modern cargo airplane.
Right.
At least it was when I was flying it. The C5 has been upgraded with some engines and new avionics now. So
Was that
I
made
don't
by
know that.
Lockheed? Sir?
C5 is made by Lockheed,
Yeah.
and the C-17, originally made by McDonnell Douglas, is now made by Boeing.
Yeah.
So but the C-17 is a bit smaller.
Right.
It's a smaller aircrew, smaller airplane, but it's still a cargo plane. Still four-engine cargo plane. So I flew that for a couple of years. And at this point in my career, uh, most people end up going to some type of staff tour, and it's always good for your career to go do a staff tour and to go do different opportunities. Well, I started as an airman basic, was a mechanic, and now I'm flying airplanes. And I was not about to sit by idly and go drive a desk for a while and become a staff guy. Uh,
No.
they want the typical path for a pilot in the Air Force is you do a flying tour, you go to some type of staff tour, you get education in that staff tour on how things are working in the Air Force, and give you the breadth that you need to advance your career up into the colonel and general ranks at some point. So you have a better idea. It's not a bad idea. It's not a bad way to do it. It just wasn't my way to do it.
Right.
So when I found out that I was looking at a potential staff tour, I called up the people that kind of own our careers and decide who gets what assignment. And I asked them if we have any bills to pay. The scenario is I'm a pilot in the Air Mobility Command of the Air Force. And so I call up the Air Mobility folks and I say, hey, do we have any bills to pay to the other commands? Do we have anything out there for Special Operations Command to strategic? Uh, there's been out a while, so pardon me with all the way the command names have changed, but I asked them, they said, yes, we do have a bill to pay with Special Operations Command. And I said, well, what is it? They said, we've got this funny little airplane uh, out in Cannon Air Force Base, New Mexico, that we need to put a body in. My simple question was, can I sit in it to fly it? Meaning I didn't want to fly anything remote at the time. They said, yeah, you definitely sit in it. I said, well, what is it? Said, it's called an M28 Skytruck. So I sitting at my desk in my C-17 office, and I Google M28 Skytruck, and it's kind of a goofy looking thing. It's a turboprop. I've never flown turboprops before, and so it's a turboprop, fixed gear, unpressurized airplane. I like to think it very much as a truck, or if maybe Jeep decided to build an airplane, this is what it would come out as. This particular airplane is a great little bush plane. It's very similar to a Twin Otter in its mission set. It's got bigger engines and a little bit more capacity, though. But it was a ton of fun. It was more fun than I ever expected flying airplanes, and I fell in love with flying turboprops. So I moved out to New Mexico and flew that airplane and became part of that special operations mission out there. I was called the non-standard aviation unit, which just meant um, we weren't flying what they commonly refer to as a military specification airplane or a mil-spec airplane,
Right.
like the C5 and C-17s are.
Right.
This was a commercial off-the-shelf airplane that we purchased, and we adapted to what we needed it to be. It was pretty fun. It was had all civilian markings on it, and when we deployed, most of our deployments were in civilian clothes with the civilian marked airplane, and we just went up and did what we were supposed to and got it done.
Yeah.
That plane or that squadron had the PC-12 Pilatus in it as well, so we got to fly. I was fortunate enough. I got to fly both, so it was great. It was a great opportunity and just absolutely more fun with an airplane than I ever thought was out there.
So you put a lot of hours on that machine then?
Yeah, I did a lot of hours. I think by the time I retired in 2016, I was sitting somewhere around 5,000, a little over 5,000 hours.
Right.
So yeah, I did the lion's share of work. I think the lion's share of work were maybe the C5. I did a lot of hours in C5 with big ocean crossings and things like that. But I've got just as much hours in that Skytruck as I did in that C5. So it was fun.
Interesting. And so now at some point I believe when you retired or whenever you decided to go into f- become a fashion entrepreneur, how do you go from the little truck airplane twin turbo to become a fashion entrepreneur?
It sounds like a crazy journey, and I'm going to tell you it is. So when I retired, um, right before I retired, I ended up kind of starting a company that I never really intended to, but there was a need for it. So I started an aviation training company, and that training company, I simply started to help out some folks that were needing to get their air transport pilots licenses. And I noticed there was a deadline coming in the United States that August of 2016, they were going to change the requirements of the air transport license. So a lot of the military pilots were not going to be eligible to go test and take that test. So I had guys come to me and say, "Sir, you're the only one with any civilian ratings. Do you think you can help us out?" So I went through a crazy way to get a twin engine Beechcraft Duchess, and I started training people to pass their air transport pilot check ride. After going through that, it gave me a lot of exposure in different airplanes. So at this point, I've flown 4 different airplanes in the Air Force: C5, C-17, M28, and the PC-12 Pilatus. Now I've flown uh, reciprocating engine, you know, just regular propeller stuff that I'd never flown before. but I'm getting a lot of experience in it. And what that did is it started driving more traffic to me on the civilian side, where people just wanted to come learn how to fly an airplane because they saw me out training all these pilots. And I tried to turn them away at first, and I said, "Hey, look, I've never trained a brand new person to fly an airplane. I've trained pilots to fly different airplanes, and
Yeah.
that's kind of where my expertise lies. I take a pilot that's already flying something, and I train them how to fly something else, or I train them how to get ready for a certain check ride." I said, "But I've never flown with anybody that's never flown," and so I kept getting people kept coming back, and they weren't getting the service they needed. So I kind of stuck my neck out there, and I talked to a friend I met at our little local airport. His name was Ed, really great guy. I said, "Ed, I've never flown with a new person, and you're an old flight instructor. Take me out, teach me what I need." So we went out and we flew. We flew a couple of days together, and he kind of walked me through the paces of what it's like to teach a private pilot. And so after that training with him, I decided, okay, I'll give it a shot. I ended up teaching private pilots in there, teaching complex, high performance. I teach tail wheel. I started teaching a whole lot of stuff. So by the time I retired, I had flown a ton of different stuff. And I think today I'm sitting at 38 different airplanes.
Oh my God.
Um, but so what does that mean? That means um, I had a lot of stuff, a lot of numbers going through my head, and I have to pick the ones that, hey, this is the one that is making me money. I better know this one very well, and I can have some familiarity with other ones. Well, right when I retired, about the day after, a former commander of mine called me, and he said, "Hey, Jared, um, his name's Dave. He's since passed, but love that man. He was such a good guy." He called me up and he said, "I'm looking for somebody that can kind of get in anything and fly it." And I was like, that piqued my interest. I said, okay, well, this sounds fun. I said, well, what are we doing, Dave? And he said, I work for a company that rescues kids that have been sold into human trafficking.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I'm in, whatever you need. He said, I can't pay you a lot. I said, you don't have to pay me anything, Dave. Just if you can cover expenses, that'd be great. So Dave and I talked. We worked it out. He wanted me to meet the CEO of the company. So I flew out there. I met the CEO. Him and I hit it off well. Um, I like him, still talk to him today. He still mentors me on stuff today. Uh, but they needed a pilot to help with their mission. And I sat around and I was still teaching for my company, but I sat around and I'd call Dave or I'd call the CEO. I'd change it out every week. One week I'd call Dave, the next week I'd call the CEO, next week I'd call Dave, just asking if they had anything. Um, at the time, they'd say, we're working on things, we'll let you know when we need you. And I think they said, I think Jared's a trapped border collie in an apartment. We're not sure he's not chewing down the drapes or something. He's calling all the time looking for work, which I was happy to do it. I'm out flying, training sorties in my airplanes, but I want to go be a part of this rescue mission. I think this is fantastic. So we, I decided to go off to training um, to go through aerial firefighting school. And in the middle of that, I get a call from the CEO. He says, "Hey, I have an opportunity for you." He says, "How would you like to help me put together a team to fly for a client of mine in a Gulfstream? They want to buy a Gulfstream jet." I said, "Okay, that sounds great." So I put the brakes on any aerial firefighting, and I went and worked with him to develop uh, the people we needed and figure out what airplane and kind of put that whole package together for a family that was going to purchase their first Gulfstream. So we got that, went through the training,
So
and
just,
started.
Jared, a Gulfstream is a jet, twin engine
Yes,
jet made by, is,
Gulfstream is the corporation.
is the corporation that makes them, still makes them today. It's a
So they make
pretty respectable
yes,
medium-sized jet, really.
yes, it's a very nice jet. It
Yeah,
is very probably the nicest piece of equipment I've ever flown.
right.
Um, and we went through that, and I met the family. I really liked the family, enjoyed flying for them. But that was the first time I ever really got introduced to anything in the luxury space. I've seen, I've been around, I've had a ride in a Porsche, or I've had a ride in a Mercedes or whatever. But I thought, like a $2,000 Louis Vuitton was like the epitome of luxury handbag. I had no idea what was out there, right? And so one night we're at dinner with the family, and they're always very gracious and very, very generous with us. So they'd invite us to dinner as their pilot crew. Um, and we're sitting there having a conversation, and one of the daughters is talking about a handbag she recently purchased uh, called an Hermes Birkin bag. And the Birkin has quite the reputation that I had no idea even existed. But this bag is worth well over $25,000.
Oh my
And
God.
I was floored. I was absolutely floored. So I asked her, I said, what does a $25,000 handbag look like? So imagine, if you will, we're sitting at a long table. All of us, I'm sitting on the side of it. The owner of the aircraft is at the head of the table. At the other end of the table is a chair holding nothing but handbags for the women of the family. And she gets up and goes over to the chair, picks it up, and hands it to me. And so it's the first time in my life I'm holding a Birkin. I look at it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have no idea that this was even out here, at this price point, you know. Um, and then I look over at that chair that she picked it up from, and lo and behold, I think all the bags in that chair probably added up to more than my entire net worth. And it dawned on me, John, right then while I'm holding this thing, I said, this is what I need to do. And it's strange because I have no background in fashion. I have no background in design. I got an industrial technology degree from Southern Illinois University. I've been a pilot, for the majority of my adult life, and a mechanic prior to that. But I saw this bag and I thought it was, I knew it was divinely inspired, because as I'm sitting here, the name came to me, the designs, marketing ideas, where to source stuff. All these things came flooding into my brain in about 15 seconds. It was overwhelming, quite frankly. And I was never one to be, hey, let me talk about this business idea. That wasn't me. I was enjoying, you know, retired life, flying a Gulfstream for this family. I liked riding dirt
Getting a
bikes,
military pension.
getting my pension. I'd go to the wind tunnel
You
to
were
train for
set.
skydiving.
You
Yeah.
didn't need anything else
No,
in your
I
mind
was in my mind, right?
up to
But
that
the
point.
good Lord, the good Lord had something else for me.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there, and everything comes flooding into me, and I said, I know what Jay Kristoff is, and I said, I know how we're going to raise money for anti-trafficking missions. And um, it's kind of funny because that Jay Kristoff, Jay stands for Jared, my first name, and Kristoff is my middle name, and it comes, it's passed down through family. The interesting thing about it is, when I was a child, I remember playing with my Tonka trucks in the backyard, thinking Jay Kristoff. That sounds like some highfalutin whatever, right? Well, it hit me right there. Jay Kristoff is a women's fashion brand, and we're going to make luxury handbags. That's what
So
we're starting with.
I'm gonna design it for you. J C together.
Yep.
J like it is on your shoulder.
That's right. So it's funny. Let me grab that. I'll show you. So for those that can't tell already, because I've been in aviation my entire adult life, I wanted something to reflect me besides, the name Jay Kristoff, because that name will go on. But if let me turn it this way. If you see that J, it's really a half of a wing.
Yeah.
So that was the design feature
I
by it.
like
I wanted something that reflected my background in
right.
it. So anyway, so that's I knew as a child that name was something. I didn't know what it was for, but I guess that was just God's way of putting it in my back pocket, so I know it's there when I need it.
Yeah.
But that day, it really kind of a strange um, thought that occurred, and I just at that point I wouldn't say I was Christian. I'd say I believed in God, but I really didn't know what it meant to be a Christian, and I thought, wow, I don't know why you're doing this for me, but okay. And so I kind of toyed with it, and I didn't embrace it yet.
Now, can you imagine this, Jared? Is there you going for dinner with the guy that owns the jet, is obviously very well off. There's
Mhm.
another group of people, including pilots, that's sitting around that table with his daughter that is very well off too, talking
Yeah.
about the purse that she has, $25,000, $25,000 for a purse,
Hmm.
and then takes you over to the chair at the other end of the table with all the other purses, with all those people that have obviously money as well. And there you
Yeah.
had X amount of millions of dollars of purses in that seat on the other hand of the table. And all of a sudden, to you, it says, click.
Yep.
Then
Yep.
what happened?
So then I start I start toying around with the idea of creating J. Kristoff as a company with this mission. But how do you go from my background to telling your friends that, hey, I think I think my future is in women's fashion, right? I've been in combat a good portion of my life. Uh, a great friend of mine's a retired Master Chief Navy SEAL. Um, everybody, all my friends are people that have careers that have been very similar to me, right? I've got
Pull,
friends that have started whiskey companies. I've got friends that have done other things like that. And here I am. Oh, hi. I think I'll get into women's fashion.
yeah, pulled
So,
wrenches
yeah, yeah.
on
I've turned
seas.
wrenches. Yeah. So it's to say I hadn't just jumped in all in yet uh, would be an understatement. I was just kind of toying with it. And as fate would have it, um, I'd spend a little time and effort here, a little time and effort there, work on some drawings maybe, talk to some suppliers maybe, but it wasn't an everyday thing like it is today. And it certainly wasn't everything that I would just introduce myself. This is what I do, right? I was always a pilot. Oh, I've kind of got this thing I'm trying to figure out. But I now introduce myself as the CEO of J. Kristoff. It's a women's fashion company, and this is what my side hustle is flying airplanes. Right now, the side hustle is, making sure everything else gets done, which I love it. I'm super blessed for that. But going from not having, half-heartedly, I should say, uh, being interested in Jay Kristoff to where I am today. Uh, I was flying for the airline I currently fly for. This was 2021. We're descending into San Antonio, and the captain and I were having a good conversation, and he said he challenged me. He said, "Jared, what is the best day of your life?" And I said, "Man, it's got to be when my kids were born." He said, "I challenge you to think that today is." And basically what he was saying was make every day that you wake up, make that your best day of your life. He says, you don't know how many you got. So make sure today is the best day of your life. Everything that you do, everything that you touch. And I thought, well, that's pretty profound. And I like that. Well, as it turns out, when we're coming out of the San Antonio airport, uh, there was a shooting, and we were right in the middle of it. As soon as we walked out the doors, There was somebody, for reasons I have no idea, he came up, he started shooting up the airport. And I've watched surveillance videos of us. Our crew van got shot up. The doors and windows that we came out of got shot up. And we tucked behind a big pillar of cement. And, when he just kept shooting. And it's one of those things, John, I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but everything seems to happen in slow motion, right? From that first gunshot coming out, I sat there and I thought, gosh, I really wish I could convince me that that was a backfire of a car. But it's 2021 and cars don't backfire. you know, we're not having, any kind of carburetor problems or timing problems or anything like that. So cars are not going to backfire. I had that whole thought in the span between the first and second round coming out, and there was no delay in pulling the trigger. Um, by the time the second round got out, I had said to myself, you need to run and find cover. And I think we finally got cover just after the third round came out. And he continued to fire and continued to fire. And all I could think, again, something strange when you're in a shooting scenario or a high stress scenarios. They people and professionals talk about auditory exclusion at times, and I can tell you it certainly happened to me that day. The only thing I could hear was my voice to my captain and gunfire. I couldn't hear the glass breaking around me. I couldn't hear the people screaming. All I could hear was my voice and what I was telling the captain, and the shots ringing out. And I thought, as long as he's shooting, I doubt he's trying to get a better angle on us. So as long as he's shooting, we're probably in our best position we're going to be, which was pretty close. Maybe three car lanes away from him,
Too
and
close.
too close. And when the shooting stopped, I dipped my head out behind to see what he's doing, and he was reloading. And so then I pulled my head back in, but he was in the same spot, thank goodness. He was not trying to move to get better angles on people. He was in the same spot. And then he started to unload another magazine. And at some point, the police that were there engaged him and stopped it. But that was the day that I said, okay, I said, I'm done messing around. I'm done thinking Jay Kristoff is just something I need to try to figure out. And I kind of went full speed ahead at that point. Um, Everything else that was a distraction in my life, I took it out, got rid of it, whatever it was, and started going full throttle into developing J. Kristoff as a brand. Um, as the year progressed, I've had these different nudges along my life where God has intervened. And like I said, I wouldn't have called myself, well, I probably would have called myself a Christian. I just didn't know what being Christian was. So I would have falsely been claiming myself as a Christian. But on December 4th of 2022, I actually gave my life to the Lord and surrendered everything, knowing that this is His company. I'm here as His hands and feet. I'm here to execute the mission. I'm here to make sure that I'm obedient in doing what He's asked. So that guides everything that I do now, in everything, in every way for this company. Uh, that is the cornerstone that keeps us focused and keeps me pushing. And even when you get into something like, hey, you're in women's fashion, you have zero training in this. Yep, but for some reason, God asked me to do it, so I will. And that's kind of where we are today. Obviously, we've run production lines, we've got our social media push out there, our advertising campaigns, and we're running as a company. But the why behind it, that kind of gives you the insight on where I was through my career and how I went from combat pilot to women's fashion and luxury handbag.
Isn't it amazing, Jared, how things happen and
Oh yeah,
circumstances that you were involved in change your life and still are very much part of that even today. But
absolutely.
there are certain points in particular, the one that you had obviously with the shooter, but also the
Yeah.
other ones where on a number of occasions you met an individual really didn't expect anything other than
Mhm.
what happened at that moment in that relationship that changed your life as well. If that were
Absolutely.
right from the beginning when you left school and were thinking about where do I go from here, your friend went into the Marines. You thought, that maybe be interesting because of what he said. You walked into the recruiter for the Air Force, and it was his story in particular that you liked that triggered you to go and become Air Force. And then obviously
Yes.
stay there from flying large aircraft or first pulling wrenches, and then from there on developing the dream of becoming the pilot, flying C5 cargo planes, amazing, amazing aircrafts, and put in a lot of hours and all the other
Yeah.
steps. And then all of a sudden, then the next thing is the amazing part is that you fly, the commercial or the private aircraft or the jet with the entrepreneur that had made a lot of money, obviously, in the family, and met his daughter, and all of a sudden during dinner, and said, "Here is the purse, and it's
Yeah.
$25,000." Or the customer must be not out and say, "Where is? You have to see that purse." And
Yeah.
so she said, "Okay, we'll walk to the end of the table, and there the whole chair is full of purses, and there's probably $2 million worth of purses." That changed your mind. And then at that moment, all of a sudden, I look again at the logo because also your success already had the foundation because you're Jared Christopher, the JC has always been part of your life in some form. And then what
Mhm.
is unique about it, turn it sideways, and it reminds you of the wing of an aircraft and all of that
Mhm.
stuff. And at that point, you knew luxury purses, $25,000 a copy, really, and then from there
Right.
on in, started flying again until you got into the shooting, and all of a sudden the whole world changed for you at that particular moment, and that's where you are today. So tell us
Right.
about JC. You're still flying even now, still today?
I am. I fly for a commercial airline here in the United States, and um, the it's important, I think, to pay tribute to the aviation background through this company, right? Because it's what provides and supports the startup. We're completely self-funded. I've got no investors. I've got no loans. We're completely no debt. And it's super important for me to do that because our goal is to raise money and through our handbags. We're a for-profit company, but we're going to take those profits and allow the consumer to choose where those profits go to help the anti-trafficking movement. Um,
Now,
so I don't take wages.
I love what you're saying here, but I have to ask you this question. So
Okay.
now we are sitting here on a podcast, and
Hmm.
that is being shown around the world, so and we have, I'm not bragging here, but close to 1 million subscribers on YouTube. That means
Oh
that we
wow.
probably have 2 million people watching us around the world. I have to ask you this, Jared. How much costs your pouch or your
A
bag?
bag.
Yeah, I don't even want to call it a bag. I want to call it because how much is
This
it?
this this bag retails for $2,700, and that this bag right here retails for $3,500. So
I
they're both made from imported Italian leather here in the United States.
Yeah, I love it. I had to ask you that. Now, the other thing that you have to share with us is Now you still keep doing this. You do it on a no profit. The profits that you make for it go towards what?
So the profits that we make, they go towards running the company, right?
Right.
Because it's expensive to run a production line. It's
Yeah.
expensive to run advertising. So it takes care of all the expenses that we have. Uh, any employees that we have, it has to cover. But my wife and I, we don't take any wages.
No.
So we run the company from the it's a startup. We're small, so it's not a big. We don't have a deep bench yet, but the goal is Aviation will pay for my family's expenses. But J.Christoph, as long as I am the head of J.Christoph, uh, I'm going to use as much money as we can out of it to give back to the anti-trafficking community. And so, what does that mean, and how does that work? Right now, we're targeting 20% of our profit. Um, so, if you as the consumer come onto the website and you purchase a bag, you actually get to choose where that money goes. Unless you want me to make the decision, we've vetted 13 or 14 different nonprofits that are in the anti-trafficking space. That maybe they're close to your hometown, or maybe you have a connection to them, and you get to invest that money back into your own community if you so choose to. Now, if you just want us to take the pick, we can do that too. But that's really part of the experience here. Is I want the customer. I don't even like calling them customers. I want them to be partners in a mission, right? Because it's about the mission. It's not about me. It's not even about our bag, but the bag is a catalyst to get people involved. The bag. Imagine, if you will, somebody. Oh,
In
I'm sorry.
rescue in particular, right? That you're so
It'd be
involved in.
really what I think there's kind of three pillars to it. I think there's the prevention, that is key and very important piece of what this bag stands for. Rescues, and then the rehabilitation. Um, Everybody talks about the rescues mostly because that's the high energy, high excitement thing, but the real work is in the rehabilitation, trying to get these people that have been trafficked what they need, and all the systems and things that they need, because our governments only can provide so much.
So, if you're talking about rescue and the three pillars, give us
Mhm.
a profile of the individuals that would be in those particular pillars, as to ages.
So
Are they male, female? Are they so? Give
sure.
us a profile.
So depending on, and the statistics are all over the board, but depending on what statistic you look at, there's approximately 300,000 at youth risk inside the United States. Um, the actual reporting of the trafficking is kind of a flawed statistic, because you're only getting what is actually reported. And because it's such a dark underground world, you're not going to get everything that you report. But some of the stats, out of the United States, or let me back that up. About, let's see, 38% are children. Um, we're looking at, I wrote some down here. Out of that 38% of children, 22% are girls, 16% are boys. Out of the adults, 39% are typically women, 23% percent. I think I got that statistic wrong. Anyway, the I wrote some down. Now I can't make heads or tails of what I wrote down. Anyway, it's worse than it needs to be, for sure. If
Yeah,
you've got one person trafficked, it's too bad.
yeah,
But the majority seem to be women.
yeah,
Men do get trafficked; and they get trafficked for labor.
yeah.
Um, there's the majority percentage of women do get trafficked into sexual exploitation,
It's
which
probably two
is
thirds, one third in that area, maybe.
yeah, I've got uh, I've got a statistic here that says 60% are trafficked into sexual exploitation,
Right,
which, again, I take all of them with a grain of salt, because how do you, who's going to talk to you about it? How do you
right,
track it?
right.
So with all of it, they're all kind of fuzzy, and you can look at
Right.
5 different statistics and they'll tell you 5 different things.
Right.
Um, but what I know is that one is too many,
Yeah.
and through my life experience and the trafficking that I've seen, um, which I actually saw in when I was on an operation in the Air Force. It was my first experience in it. Um, and some of the things that have happened to my family personally, I know that this is the space that we need to be in, and we're going to do everything we can as a company to start with prevention,
Exactly.
and that's where the bag comes.
And create awareness, and hopefully this podcast will help
Right.
to do that as well, because I believe this is not unique to the United States. It is
Oh
happening
no.
in Canada and around the world, and that's why it is so important from your perspective to speak about it and to be part of my podcast. If you got how do people contact you in regards to the rescue side, but also in regards, in particular, also about the purses and the other things that you have available?
So we have J.Christoph.com. Uh, all of our contact information is on the bottom. If you scroll to the bottom of the homepage, we have all our social media and outreach things that you can reach to us. We don't, I don't advocate uh, for any one particular rescue company or any. You'll see our partners that we've partnered up with.
Yeah,
And if somebody wants to contact them directly, by all means, I would encourage that.
exactly.
As far as, kind of going back to those 3 pillars, the prevention side, imagine, if you will, John, somebody that normally might carry a Chanel bag or even that Birkin bag, them walking into one of their events with a J. Kristoff bag. Here's a quiet luxury bag. They walk in with their circle of influence, who also is wearing a Birkin bag or the latest Chanel or the latest Gucci. They get a question about, what bag is that? Whose is that?
Exactly.
That's where I want to be. I want our
That's
bag
the
there, because
and
then it
and
drives the conversation in their circle of friends,
and
right?
if we
Because
can help to create that awareness through this podcast, then that's my objective. Yeah.
that's exactly right. And so when a woman walks in carrying a J. Kristoff bag, it's more than just the latest design from Chanel. And Chanel bags are beautiful, without a doubt. And you can walk in with the latest and greatest one. But when you walk in with a J. Kristoff bag, you say something more, and people are going to ask. And then it drives the conversation to the mission. It drives the conversation to anti-trafficking awareness. And that is what the bag is for, right? The money goes to the nonprofits, and the bag drives the conversation to help prevent. And that's really what we want. We want to stop it before it ever starts.
Exactly. Now the other part about it is that have you done anything as I'm an author as well, so I've done 5 books and I'm working on 2 more. You have such an amazing background, especially at all phases, actually, right from the beginning when you left
Thank you.
college and went on and on and on. So, which can be in taking you all the way to the shooting and then all the way to, and I'm looking at your JC, where you started dreaming about that potential, the name that
Mhm.
you got given to you by your parents at the time that you were born, that would become something unique in your age as you grew up. You didn't know what it would be, but at some point it could be and it will be and it is. So does that not create the dream for a lot of people that are no different than you were when you were going to college? What am I going to
Right,
do? I don't know,
right,
until certain things happened. And that what I say a lot of times to younger people in particular, find your passion,
mhm,
and so because if you find your passion, you will living the dream. And it's a book that I wrote about that, actually. Finding your passion, living the dream, is that
right,
uh, uh, the reason that I wrote the book is that I heard a news on a U.S. station that the comments were that up to 75% of the people that work, and I think it is the same in Canada as the United States, do not like their jobs. And probably 70% of that 75% are looking for another job. And so I do a lot of presenting to younger people in high schools, colleges, and universities. And I ask a lot of times the question, so to some of them, as saying, so when you finish here, what are you going to do? And you say, I don't know. And saying, my suggestion, with all due respect, is that if you think about becoming a truck driver, talk to a truck driver. Talk about owning the truck. Talk about long hauling, short hauling. Talk about owning more trucks, entrepreneur. Or you want to be a construction individual, talk to contractors, see what they are doing, what is involved, how about this, how about that. You want to build houses, talk to somebody who builds houses. Or you want to be a doc, or you want to be a lawyer, or for that matter, an entrepreneur. They all love to talk to you and give you ideas about what worked for them, what doesn't, and where they see the opportunity. Because most of your life, you will be working or doing work for a living. And if you don't like what you're doing, then you take it with you all around you, into your family and all the other things, and you will not be a happy person. And so for me, different story, but I was born in northeastern Holland in 1940. I'm turning 85 in November. During the war years, I saw far too much that we should not have seen. I was not as successful academically. I left school at 12 and a half, failed grade 3, failed grade 7 3 times, and then we were liberated by the Canadian Army. April is always important for me, and so is May, because we were liberated in northeastern Holland by the Canadian Army on April the 12th, 1945, and I was 5 years old. And I was so impressed by the soldiers that I knew from that time forward I would go to the land of my heroes. And
Awesome.
That was the one dream. And the other dream is, my grandfather was a master carpenter, and my dad worked in lumber. I wanted to build a lumber mill, but I wanted to start with nothing. And so, so when I came to, I left Holland when I was 23 actually, and flew into Montreal, took the plane across the train across Canada, 4 days, 5 nights. My God, that's a long way. Anyway, came to Vancouver. Couldn't speak language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job, but I had a suitcase, 3 books, and 2 sets of clothes. And then I couldn't speak the language, so I went down to the immigration department, and fortunately I could speak a little bit of German as well. So, and there was a German fellow there, so I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to build a lumber mill. He said, go to Prince George. That's where they're building all the mills, and so I did. In July of 1965, as the Greyhound took about 13 hours or so, came off the bus here, could speak language, didn't know soul, didn't have a job. And I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47. But what I did have, attitude, I've always been positive. Even now, I avoid the negative. Don't even come close to me. And so, because every day is a special day for me as well. Passion is that whatever I do, I give it 125%. Work ethic, I work harder than anybody. And even now at nearly 85, I usually get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, Air Force, and then I'm always think I'm late. And so, yes, I did build my mill, and it's not about my success, but 10 other companies, and I'm doing well. And then obviously I love podcasting. I wrote the books, and I have a whole series of them here. I'm going to send to you my 5 books that I did, including one of the last ones that I did here, Living Young, Dying Old. And that's a picture of me I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. And so I'm going to sign those books and I'm going to send them to you.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate that very much.
Think about writing a book about your story because it's uniquely different. It would reach, and especially with the JC and all the things around it, what we have heard so far, to share that with others and inspire them would be very, very important, at least in my mind. So I'm going to send you copies of my book so that
Thank you.
hopefully it maybe will even inspire you. Jared, it was a privilege and a pleasure. Your amazing story and all the things that you're still doing today has been an inspiration to me as it has been for other people around the world. Check out the website of Jared Christopher.com. And for other people, if you like what you saw in this podcast, both Jared and myself, and you like to see more of it, like it, subscribe to our podcast, share it with others, and have comments. Jared, we'll stay in touch.
Thank you so much. I look forward to it. And
Thanks,
I appreciate you. Hope to see people at J.Christoph.com.
Excellent. Thanks, Jared. Take care.
Take care.